Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for another session of Yoga Insights. This evening, we will be joined by Bangalore-based Hatha Yoga teacher Pragya Bhatt. So Pragya considers both teaching and alignment in her teaching, and she regularly contributes to newspapers and publications and is a compulsive blogger and diarist. She is also author of the book Beyond Asanas. And in today's session, she'll be using a subset of the asanas in her book and will be talking about the mythological context of asanas and how this mythology informs the spiritual lessons that are embodied by them. So, Pragya, would you like to join us, please?
Hi, Sophia.
Pragya. Hi, Pragya. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm going to hand over the session to you right now, and I'll see you at the end of the session when we're doing Q&A. Really looking forward to listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to my session titled Beyond Asanas, Drawing Lines Between Mythology and Modern Asana Practice. Like Sophia said, this presentation is actually based on my 2019 book titled Beyond Asanas, The Myths and Legends Behind Yogic Postures. And in today's session, I'll be looking at 5 asanas that I've written about in the book, and I'll analyze the connections that exist between the mythology, the symbolism, and the physical practice of each of these postures. Now, to begin, I'd like to say that my presentation today is from the point of view of a practitioner scholar. Now, most of us have heard about scholar practitioners, but what exactly is a practitioner scholar? So I'd like to begin by defining what a practitioner scholar is and what is the importance of the practitioner scholar point of view. Now, what is a practitioner scholar? And more importantly, is there actually a difference between a practitioner scholar and a scholar practitioner? And when I was actually looking to see if I could find any existing research or research paper on this topic, I actually came across a paper titled The Scholar Practitioner of Yoga in the Western Academy. And I've referenced this paper at the end of the PPT. And this is actually written by Mark Singleton and B. Larios, and these guys are eminent scholars in the yogic studies space. And they have defined the scholar practitioner as people who do not come from traditional yoga practicing communities, nor from the traditions of knowledge transmission of South Asia. So simplifying it a little bit, a scholar practitioner's view of yoga philosophy is informed by the academic study and research they've done on the subject. And this might be supplemented by some sort of yogasana practice. But there is a clear absence of exposure to traditional methodologies of yoga study. Whereas the practitioner scholar, like me and a lot of my colleagues and a lot of people who are watching us today, we are the exact opposite. We begin our journeys in a traditional manner, so with a teacher or at the feet of a guru, and then years later, we go into academics to deepen our understanding of the practice that we already do. And that's, of course, been my personal journey. My relationship with yoga started in a yoga studio. And after some time, I decided I was ready and also that I was interested in studying the philosophies. And this journey is what informs my understanding of the subject of yoga. It informs how I teach yoga. It is what led me to write the book. And it also informs the point of view through which I'll be presenting the asanas today. And the reason that I'm so enchanted by the idea of the practitioner scholar and why I think it's important for us to assert the idea of a practitioner scholar is because, in my opinion, it's a fundamental approach to the study of yoga. And at a time when yogic studies and philosophy are becoming quite trendy and commercially very attractive, we're starting to see that the focus is shifting away from the physical practice of yoga to intellectual debating and philosophizing of yogic theories. And all that is great. It also has a place. But the result of this movement is that we have more scholars and we have fewer practitioners. And we are losing out on a lot of the knowledge that can be gained only on the yoga mat. And so the point of view of a practitioner scholar is very, very important in the current scenario. So now let's begin by understanding how we're going to be examining or studying the asanas today. Today I'm going to be taking examples of 5 asanas, and I'm going to analyze them in terms of their etymology, mythology, symbolism, and the physical practice. And like I said before, this presentation is structured around 5 asanas, which are very popular asanas amongst yoga practitioners and yoga classes today. And these are Trikonasana, Adho Svanasana, Virabhadrasana, Vrikshasana, and Hanumanasana. And I will, of course, be using anecdotes and stories from my book, Beyond Asanas, to talk about these asanas. Now, let's begin with Trikonasana. Now, Trikona means 3-sided, and asana means seated position. So this is a combination of trikon and asana. And whenever I talk about the Trikonasana, I like to use the analogy of an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle represents a state of perfect balance and equilibrium. And that is the state that we aspire to when we practice the Trikonasana. And the triangle, or the Trinity, is the most recognized symbol in many cultures and religions today. So you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or the Holy Ghost. You have Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, birth, life, and death in Hinduism. And whenever we look at the symbolism that is connected to the Trikonasana, and here's a picture of Trikonasana taken from the book, whenever we look at the symbolism, we always go back to the analogy of the equilateral triangle. It's a picture, it's a figure of perfect balance and is therefore robust. It can maintain its shape without caving into any pressure on any of its side. So it represents stability, power, beauty, and strength. And this asana also actually symbolizes the convergence of 3 phases of time in the practitioner's body. The Trikonasana depicts our past, present, and future, and we will see how it does so in our bodies physically in the next slide. Okay, so to do that, we'll look at a few pictures of Trikonasana. Now, here is one of my students. She's practicing Trikonasana with blocks to keep her torso open and wide. Here is a picture of Trikonasana. It's a picture of me trying to lengthen the sides of my torso, and I'm using a chair to do that. And finally, here are some students who are using a belt to widen their chest and sternum. Now, all of these pictures do depict a different variation of Trikonasana practice, but the symbolism about time that I mentioned in the previous slide, it remains the same. So the back leg in Trikonasana, it represents the past. The hips represent the present, and the front leg represents our future. And the back leg always provides stability to the hip and to the front leg. So the symbolism here is that the past provides support to the present and to the future. And the front foot in Trikonasana is always turned outwards as though to the future. So in Trikonasana, when you reach forward, do you think only of how far you can reach, or do you reach with an awareness of the alignment of the back foot and your hip? So if I were to ask you this question in a different way, I would ask you, do you frantically reach forward towards your future? Do you frantically rush towards your future with no thought about the lessons you've learned in your past, or with no grounding in the present? The question that this asana makes us ask is, does our past support the future goals that we have? Does our present support the future goals that we have? And the Trikonasana shows us that we can proactively change our quality of life by consciously changing the way we practice. So you can start to create the future you want by ensuring that your present aligns with where you see yourself in the future. Okay, and to drive the symbolism further, I would like to introduce everyone to the game of how many triangles can you spot? So this is a game that's frequently played by yoga students. And like I said, it brings about a little bit more of the symbolism of Trikonasana. What we're going to do, what we do in this game is we look at a picture of Trikonasana. Here's a picture. And we try to spot how many triangles, the maximum number of triangles within the Trikonasana. And the Trikonasana is actually a collection of many triangles. And the more you study it, the more triangles you're able to find. So now the next image is an image that I actually made for Instagram a few years ago. And you'll be able to see how many triangles there actually are in the Trikonasana. So you have like the triangle in yellow, which encompasses the entire figure. Then you have the triangle in brown, which is connecting the inner legs to the ankles. Then you have the triangle in green, which is connecting the wrist to the right hip. And finally, you have two triangles in purple, connecting the sides of the torso to the wrist. So altogether, at this moment in time, we can see 5 triangles within the triangle pose. And like I said, if you look more closely, you'll be able to find many, many more. And the symbolism here is that our foundation has to be strong. So the foundational Trikonasana within your outermost Trikonasana has to be stable. You can only build a strong outermost shell or kosha if you have a strong inner foundation. So that's the game, and you can try to play it in your free time as well. Okay, so now let's move on to the next asana, which is Adho Mukha Svanasana. Now, Adhas Mukha Shwana. So Adhas means down, Mukha means face, and Shwana means dog. And whenever we think of this posture, we think of loyalty and man's best friend, because it's also called downward dog. And the chapter on Adho Mukha Svanasana is actually the first chapter in my book. And the story I recount is one from the Mahabharata. And it is the story about a dog that Yudhishthira becomes fond of. And the story is about the time after the war of Kurukshetra, and the Pandavas make their way up the mountain from there, where they would board a chariot to heaven. And Yudhishthira is leading the way, and he's followed by his brothers and Draupadi. And for various reasons that you can read about in the book, each one of them falls. They just collapse. It's shown that they're so close to heaven, yet they don't make it. And finally, Yudhishthira is the last man standing. And Indra says to him that, you are welcome to heaven, but the dog with you isn't. And there is a dog that has actually followed the 6 of them up the mountain. And Yudhishthira has formed a strong bond with the dog. And he says, and I'm just going to read from the book. He says, "Lord Indra, I can only come to heaven if this dog comes with me. He has followed us from the base of the mountain and has been with me as I lost every single one of my siblings and my beloved wife. He has been with me in sorrow, in happiness, in sadness, and in bliss. He has seen me tired and hungry. Now, when I'm at the brink of heaven, I do not wish to abandon him." Lord Indra, of course, could not allow a dog into heaven, as dogs were considered inauspicious. Yudhishthira found himself becoming increasingly emotional. "Lord Indra, the dog has done nothing to harm anyone or anything. It has shown only the utmost loyalty, faith, and love. I'm afraid if he can't enter heaven, then neither can I." So saying, he turned away from the celestial chariot and started to walk away. Lord Indra stopped Yudhishthira. He says, "Congratulations, Yudhishthira, you have passed the ultimate test. This dog is none other than Dharma, and you have shown that you have an intimate bond with Dharma. Welcome to heaven." As Yudhishthira boarded the chariot and flew to heaven, the dog turned into the god of Dharma. So this is a story about how your karma actually follows you all the way into the afterlife, how your Dharma actually follows you all the way into the afterlife. Now, let's look at a few pictures of the Adho Mukha Svanasana practice. So here's a picture of me doing the Adho Mukha Svanasana in Hampi, and it's a picture from the book. And I remember, when I first came across the story of Yudhishthira being the only one to make it heaven, I was baffled. I thought everyone, had fought to the best of their ability in this huge battle. Everyone had experienced loss and heartbreak. Everyone had put in everything that they had into this war, yet only one man makes it to heaven. So why? And we also know that Yudhishthira is called Dharamraj. He's the king of Dharma. And you can tell by the previous story that he is willing to stand up for what he believes in. And the only way that we can actually stand up very confidently and with a lot of conviction about our beliefs is if we have the ability to introspect. So introspection is one of the qualities that you attain through regular practice of Adho Mukha Svanasana. And this posture is also an inversion, which also helps in the introspection aspect. An inversion is any posture where your head is below the heart. And what that does is that literally inverts your point of view. It gives you a different point of view. So through introspection, we can actually gain a different point of view, and this helps us to expand our own worldview. And this combination of introspection and consideration can bring about a great amount of quietude to the mind. So it's a restful pose. So in fact, whenever we are fatigued, whenever one of our students is fatigued, we always recommend that they hold this posture for a little bit longer because of its rejuvenating qualities, because of its therapeutic qualities. Okay, so the different ways of practicing Adho Mukha Svanasana. So for instance, this is one way of practicing it where I've placed my heels up on the wall. And what this does is it makes the posture more active. So putting the heels up on the wall actually helps in widening the soles and the hamstrings. And that actually makes the mind more alert. So in this aspect of the posture, you're alert like a dog and you're ready to protect your family, your house, yourself also. And this is the exact opposite. So in this variation, this is my friend Priya, who's also another Iyengar style teacher, and she is doing the posture in a more restful way. So her head is resting on a block and on a bolster. So here you see another aspect of the dog, which is, the dog that lazes around the sun with no deadlines and no cares in the world. And here's a picture of students in the same class in my group yoga class, but every single student is doing a different variation of the pose. So when we practice this posture, we can choose to invoke the quality we need when we practice it. So if you are fatigued, you can practice the more restful posture. If you are lethargic, you can practice the more active posture. So we can actually use the postures as per our need at that moment in time. Now let's move on to Virabhadrasana. So Virabhadrasana, Veera means courage, Bhadra means auspicious, but it also means blessed, fortunate, or prosperous. And asana, of course, is a seated posture. Virabhadra was a warrior who rose from a dreadlock that Shiva threw on the floor in grief and in anger. And this story actually has the makings of a Bollywood film, a blockbuster. It's the story of Sati and Shiva marrying against Daksha's wishes. And Daksha is Sati's dad, and like all dads, like many dads, he is not happy with Sati's decision to marry Shiva. He's not happy with her choice of groom. And he felt Shiva, was an ascetic, and he wanted his daughter to marry someone who was also a king, perhaps, or who had a kingdom and who could provide his daughter Sati with, the kind of lifestyle that she was used to as a princess. And he also wanted, a son-in-law who had a lot of influence so that he could further his own realm of influence. So there was a little bit of that reason as well. And Shiva, on the other hand, is, of course, someone who had no regard for society, and he was really uninterested in materialistic pursuits. And Sati finally, marries Shiva. But Daksha could never accept this, and he was very disappointed. And over time, this disappointment turns into a grudge against his daughter and his son-in-law. And one day, Daksha decides to organize a huge yagya. And on purpose, he doesn't invite Shiva and Sati. And Shiva is very perceptive, and he understands that this is not just an unintentional oversight. He understands that this has been done on purpose, and he tells Sati not to go. And Sati decides to give her father, the benefit of the doubt, and she decides to go. But once she reaches the venue, she finds that there's something strange that's going on. She looks around the assembly and she feels that, everyone is looking at her and laughing at her and actually pointing at her. And when she looks to her father for support, or at least for an explanation for why this is happening, why this is happening, her father, she realizes that her father is also participating in all of this. He is joining in. He's also making fun of his daughter. And that's when she has this realization, and she's heartbroken, and she's very, very angry. And she decides to jump into the fire, into the sacred fire of the yagya. And she tells Daksha that this is all his fault. And when Shiva comes to hear of this, he flies into a rage. And he actually pulls out one of his dreadlocks and he throws it on the floor. And that's how Virabhadra comes to be. And Shiva commands Virabhadra to go and decimate the entire yagya and everything that's in the yagya. And Virabhadra proceeds to do so. And his actions are actually the different stages of Virabhadrasana. They're 1, 2, and 3. And his movements are depicted in these asanas, and we will see how here. So here's a picture of Virabhadrasana 2. So imagine Virabhadrasana arrives at the scene of the yagya with his arms flung out in a warrior's manner. And then here's Virabhadrasana 1. So imagine when he reaches, he lifts his arms up, and perhaps he's lifting up a big rock or a big sword, to decimate, getting ready to decimate everything that's in front of him. And finally, Virabhadrasana 3. And this is when he hurtles forward and destroys whatever comes in his way or whatever's in front of him. And in the story that we just heard, we see that Daksha's actions put into motion this series of events that ended up with him losing his daughter. And my Vedanta teacher frequently speaks of how a grudge always harms the one who keeps it. So the more you hold on to something, like Daksha held on to his anger, the more that thing has a hold on you. So the more the past has a hold on you, that thing that you dislike or have a bad feeling about has a hold on you. And so a grudge harms only the keeper. Also in Vedanta class, we frequently talk about acceptance and understanding. If we truly internalize the idea that everyone has as much a right to their opinion as we do, a lot of the issues today have become non-issues. The culture of yoga, the yogic culture, is a culture of inquiry. And so instead of having knee-jerk reactions or instead of giving in to our samskaras, we can actually cultivate a more mindful approach. Now let's look at pictures of Virabhadrasana practice and see how the story and the symbolism we've just spoken about manifest in the physical asana practice. So first, okay, this is a picture of kids doing the asana. And if you see, the older the child, the better they are at doing the asana. So the girl in the red sweater, she has the ability to look at the posture and recreate it herself. But look at the youngest kid in the Superman t-shirt. He is also doing Virabhadrasana, but it's his version. And it's a vastly different version from everyone else. A child's interpretation of the world is always more original, more colorful, more imaginative. And children are actually uncorrupted by samskaras. And the openness and honesty of children is very evident in any yoga class. Now in this picture, it's clear that there's more focus and concentration. Also note the use of the block. This block actually enables us to engage our core, to express the confident and powerful aspect of Virabhadra. Virabhadra was a powerful and strong hero. Veera means brave. So when we practice this asana, we try to open our chest and we try to keep the hips squared and wide, which is a sign of confidence and strength. And here's another picture of adults practicing the asana. So it might seem that what these pictures are showing us is that adults are able to do the asanas better than children. But that's not what I'm trying to illustrate, and that's not true actually. What we are seeing here is that as we grow up and we gain maturity and the kind of focus that children don't have, we can actually use yogasanas as a tool to cultivate what we want or need. So for instance, a sense of confidence if we lack it, a sense of bravery if that's what we're looking for. And what I'm really trying to assert is that through the practice of yogasana, it is possible to actually cultivate emotional and mental characteristics that we need to live better. Now let's come to Vrikshasana. Now, Vriksha is tree and asana is a position. In this case, it's not a seated position, it just means position. And the banyan and peepal trees are sacred in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. And then we have the tree of knowledge in Christianity and Judaism. So the tree is a sacred symbol to many religions. And on a trip to Mahabalipuram, I found this carving on one of the temples. So this is a very zoomed in picture. And in the next slide, I'll actually show you the actual photo and you'll see how minutely I actually look at art on temple walls. And this carving is actually believed to be from the 7th century. So we can postulate that this pose has been around at least since the 7th century. And my favorite story related to this asana is of Dakshinamurti. So Dakshina means south facing or facing the south, and it can also mean kindness or even Guru Dakshina, an offering. And Dakshinamurti is the avatar that Shiva chose when he wanted to teach and spread his knowledge. And as you know, he's the Adi Yogi. It is believed that all lineages of yoga today can trace their origins back to him. And if you study this avatar, he sits under the banyan tree, and it's this beautiful wide banyan tree. And it's the classic visual of a guru and his disciples. And the shade of this tree, it provides not only a place, but also a certain ambience for study and for discourse and for debate. And all of that is so important in the quest of enlightenment. It's a very important aspect of yogic studies, of yogic quests. Now, here's the picture that I mentioned. And if you look to the left, somewhere along all those carvings is where I actually saw the tree pose. And let me show you where it was. And there it is. So it just goes to show you that you have to look really deeply to find these connections between ancient carvings, ancient stories, and modern yoga practice. Okay, now let's look at Vrikshasana, symbolism. So here's a picture of the Vrikshasana from the book. Now, the tree is the most widespread symbol of equanimity. It provides shade to everyone. It doesn't discriminate about who it's going to provide shade to. It continues to produce oxygen despite the pollution or the heat. So they continue to do their life's work. They continue to do what they're meant to do, and they just don't give up. And also the external circumstances are of no consequence to them. It's of no importance to them. A tree will stay rooted through storms and through heavy rains. And when a tree gets uprooted, we know, that it signifies a certain amount of destruction, simply because it takes so much strength and so much force to uproot a tree. And to explain this a little bit more, think about when you saw a tree, chopped down tree for the last time, when you last saw a tree that has been chopped down. And I remember I was once sitting with a friend who had this huge tree in his lawn. And one day I went to his house and the tree was no longer there. It was this huge, beautiful tree. And he said, well, it blocked the sunlight. And so he didn't get any sunlight in his house. And so there were many mosquitoes and there was a fear of dengue fever and all these other, all these other diseases. So he said, well, I just had it felled. And I remember looking at the stump and just feeling this regret and a sense of aversion. And I think a lot of us can share the feeling. And of course, it is linked to, the fact that it's about nature and the destruction of nature, or man's destruction of nature. But it is also because we know that trees are a symbol of wisdom. And when we chop them down, it is like chopping down our connection to ancient wisdom. So it's almost like breaking down the continuity between the old and new. So we regard trees as an ode to wisdom. And I always think about the banyan tree depicted in the Dakshinamurti effigies. Imagine how much that tree has witnessed just by virtue of being around in that space for so many years. And of course, another lesson here is to stay rooted like a tree despite life's ups and downs. Now, let's take a look at pictures of Virabhadrasana practice. So here again are children doing the pose, and note that the asana sits differently on different age groups. And some kids have a more easy and playful tree, and others are not able to find their balance. And to think about this point a little bit more, think about a young tree. A young tree always sways a lot more in the wind because it's still trying to grow its roots and it's still trying to establish itself. But an older tree that's healthy, we expect it to be strong and we expect it to be rooted. Similarly, children are expected to be vivacious and they're expected to have minds that are more spirited and more lively. So it's natural that they have all kinds of interpretations of the tree. However, adults, they're expected to be able to focus and balance. And frequently in yoga class, when I see an adult unable to balance, I always like to take a closer look because the reason might not just be a physical one. It might go deeper than that. So here's another picture of a kid, perhaps 4 years old at the time, doing the tree pose. She looks quite stable, but I'm sure this was just, a brief moment in time. And here's another picture of me in Mahabalipuram. So as you can see, as adults, we are consciously working on strengthening the connection between the mind and body, and hence the straighter posture. Now, let's come to Hanumanasana. And in a lot of books and websites, Hanumanasana is translated to monkey pose. And I find this to be a huge problem because I think that this term is very misleading because the pose is not dedicated to just any monkeys or to monkeys in general. The Hanumanasana, it's dedicated to someone who represents loyalty, strength, courage, discipline, etc., etc. And the story I tell in the book is called Leap of Faith. And it's about the time when Hanuman had to rescue Sita from Lanka. And usually when we're told this story, we're told that Hanuman was this strong and courageous being who overcame all kinds of hurdles to rescue Sita. But I actually decided to look at this story from a different angle. And I find that the angle that I took for this story makes it more relatable. And I started to think about Hanuman as a kid. Now, as a kid, he was different from everyone else. Not only was he stronger than everyone else, but he also looked different. And many of us have been through that experience of being different in our childhood. And we know, if we've been through that an experience like that can leave a lasting impact on our minds. So what if it did the same for Hanuman? So even though he was admired for his bravery and his strength, what if his childhood experiences had left him with an incredible amount of self-doubt? And I was thinking of this idea one day, and I realized that if you read the Hanuman Chalisa, which is an ode to Hanuman, it's considered to be an ode to Hanuman. If you read it in a particular way, it sounds more like an encouragement to Hanuman rather than only an ode to him. So perhaps Tulsidas meant for the Hanuman Chalisa to be an ode to Hanuman, and to illustrate that, so bear with me here. So to illustrate that, I'd like to share a few shlokas from the Hanuman Chalisa and explain why I feel that. So there's one shloka which says, Jug sahastra jo jan par bhanu, lilyo tahi madhur phal janu. So I'm reading from my copy of the Hanuman Chalisa. And here, Hanuman is being told that, you were so great that you confused the sun to be a sweet fruit and you dashed towards the sun without thinking that it's this great big sun. You are the one who actually did that. You are so great that you thought the sun was just a mere fruit. And then there's another shloka which says, Ram duare tum rakhware, hot na agya binu paisare. So everyone needs your permission to get into Lord Ram's room. So you're his protector, that you're so great that you are the protector of Rama. So again, trying to encourage him, trying to give him this confidence that, you've done this, you are the protector of Lord Ram. And then finally, my favorite shloka is, Bhoot pishach nikat nahi aave, Mahabir jab naam sunave. So all kinds of ghosts are also scared of you, so not only are you brave, not only do you protect Lord Ram, but even the ghosts are scared of you. And if you think about this, many of us have had this experience with our friends. When our friends are trying to encourage us, they do this. They tell us, well, you're the best. Look at what you've done. You've, passed this exam. You can do this posture. You have done this incredible thing, in the past. And, why are you feeling so low about yourself? You're so great. And our friends have done that. So we've all experienced that in our lives. So I feel that, the Hanuman Chalisa can actually be read from that point of view. And we can actually approach the story of Hanuman from that point of view, from a point of view that is more relatable to us, rather than the story of a person who is very disconnected or detached from us. And so again, from the chapter on Hanumanasana, it's called Leap of Faith, and it begins, when Hanuman decided to rescue Sita, he surveyed Lanka. It lay across the vast expanse of the ocean. He considered crossing it with a single leap, but was plagued with self-doubt. He had jumped large distances before, but a distance of this magnitude? Taking a deep breath, he took a leap of faith. And the leap of faith that I'm talking about is not the leap of faith on Lanka. It's actually a leap of faith on himself. And so a leap of faith, Hanumanasana teaches us to take a leap of faith on ourselves. Also, it's a common belief that Hanuman flew to Lanka, but he actually leapt to Lanka with one leg forward and the other one back. And here's a picture of that. And basically, this is how we want to arrive into our future. We don't want to fly into the future. We want to arrive in a very calm manner in the future, ready to take it on, with confidence and with strength. And there are many similarities between Trikonasana and Hanumanasana. In Trikonasana, like we discussed, the back leg has to be involved to be able to lengthen safely. And that's true in Hanumanasana too. So to leap forward, you need to be supported by your back leg. Your future has to have a solid foundation of your past. Also, because this is an advanced asana, it's always associated with being, flexible and with being stretchable. And nowadays I hear people always in all walks of life, and they're always being encouraged to stretch beyond their limits. And I think we need to rethink this, because when people say this, no one emphasizes safety or technique. Because only flexibility will not help you to do this pose. It's not only one thing that will help you in achieving what you want in the future. For this posture, you need correct technique, you need an understanding of body mechanics to do it safely. Similarly, for your future, it's not enough just to want something, and it's not enough just to be skilled at something. You need skills, you need preparation, you need practice, you need support. You need time, so all of that comes together for the future. So similarly in Hanumanasana also, it's not just flexibility, it's so much more than that. And also, whenever we talk about limits, and particularly when we talk about stretching beyond our limits, we need to understand our limits. What are these limits? Are these actual limits, or are these perceived limits? Why are these our limits? Have we defined them, or have other people defined them for us? So basically, we need to be more mindful about our perceptions, about our actions. And similarly, we have to be mindful when we practice this posture. So this asana actually teaches us not how to be more flexible or how to be an advanced asana practitioner, but it actually teaches us how to be more analytical and more mindful. And we can all definitely use a little bit more of that. Now, let's take a look at the practice of Hanumanasana and how the symbolism plays out in our bodies. So if you look at this picture, it's of adults practicing. And you can see in all of the three students, the front leg and the torso is bent forward. Okay, and recall what we had said about the front leg in Trikonasana, that it signifies the future. And here you can see every single student embodies that tendency to be future obsessed. So look at the posture. The head and the shoulders are curved forward. It's as though they're just rushing to the future. And we don't, again, like I said before, we don't want to rush into the future. We want to arrive at the future. We want to glide into the future. So how can we fix our asana, and how can we fix our future obsessive tendencies? What we can do is we can use a few props and work on balancing the hips, as we see in this photo. So here is my friend Priya again. And Priya is reaching up and she's expanding her torso to mirror Hanuman's wide chest, and her front and her back legs are balanced. Here we see that she's intelligently using a bolster and a blanket to provide the support that she needs. And this picture actually depicts a body that is balanced between the past and the future. So if you see, her hips are perfectly balanced between the past and the future. So the present is aligned between the past and the future. Now, I came to the practice of yoga fairly late in life. Of course, I had an exposure to yoga, as most Indian children do, but I'd say my real relationship with yoga started when I joined my first yoga class. And the more I committed to the practice, and the more I committed to the relationship, I realized the more clarity I gained about my life. So the more I practiced yoga, the better my decisions became, and my life took on a trajectory that I wouldn't perhaps have taken if yoga hadn't come into my life. And as I made better decisions, the quality of my life improved, and the quality of my asana practice also improved. So I really believe that our asana practice is an embodiment of our lives. And as I've spoken about throughout this presentation, it is possible for us to change our lives by changing our bodies. And there's an analogy that is frequently used when explaining this point. It's the analogy of the iPhone. So if you have an iPhone and you use it only to make phone calls and send and receive texts, you're not really maximizing its utility for you. So similarly, I believe yogasana practitioners who confine themselves only to the physical practice of yoga, they miss out on the wealth of spirituality, the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual wealth that is available to us. So for yogasanas to have more than only a physical impact, it is important for us to study them within the framework of the myths and stories that surround them. And that's what I've attempted to give you a glimpse of during this presentation. And here are the references. So some of you might be interested in knowing, in reading the article where I found the definition of a scholar practitioner. So here it is. And another ebook that I referred to when I was doing my research. So now we can actually take questions if there are any.
Hi, Pragya. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. I'm just going to have to apologize to you and our participants today because I'm struggling with electricity. So I'm not sure how good my internet connection is, or if y'all can even see me. But thank you so much. That was just so interesting. And as a yoga practitioner, I think you've hit upon some very important points, because it's always good to know, in-depth self-inquiry, to also inquire about the asanas, because it makes our practice so much more mindful, which is the whole point of the practice.
Yes. Yep.
So that was really nice. Can you guys still hear me? Sorry, I have to keep asking.
We can hear you. It's a little jumbled up, a little there's a little disturbance, but
I don't see anything. If you could share where we can get a want to read this book, and I think we should. Okay, we have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is from Apriya Ji, who loved the story of Hanuman from your point of view and is asking, is it important to include props or can we also practice independently? When do we know when to use them and when to explore independently?
Yes. So I'd say, yoga is all about exploration. Yogasana practice has to be with a sense of exploration. So when do we know when to use them? So for instance, if you, like we discussed about the downward dog, whenever you're feeling like, okay, today I need to rest, we suggest that you rest your forehead. So if you're finding that, okay, my forehead does not reach the floor, go ahead and use a prop to support yourself, So that's a decision that you have to make based upon what's happening in your practice, at that moment in time. Generally, I feel that, whenever I see students struggling and really fighting with themselves in their bodies to achieve a pose, I find that, it's much better not to create that sort of sensation or those feelings in the body. I think it's always better to be very aware of the sensations in the body. So are you not able to breathe in the posture? That's when you should use a prop. Is something hurting in the posture? That's when you should use a prop. Are you fighting with yourself to execute the final posture? So for instance, are you ill one day and you're not able to stretch or do as much as you would otherwise, then you can do a supported practice. You can, of course, practice independently. Yes, that's in line with the spirit of exploration. But I always think that it is important to ask yourself what you're feeling within the body, and then incorporate the use of props as required.
Thank you so much, Priyaji. I hope that answers your question. Our next question comes from Pranjali Ji. She wants to know if you can throw some light on the symbolism of breathing.
Yes. So in the grossest manner, because I'm not going to go into into specific asanas, but in the grossest manner, I'd say that whenever you are holding your breath, I see many students doing this also. In yoga class, they will hold their breath. They'll stretch to their maximum and hold their breath, and then just wait for you to count and finish the counting, and then they can come out of the pose. Now that shows me that energy is not flowing, in any asana. This can happen in any asana. So the symbolism is that we don't want to stop the exchange of energy. We don't want to stop the movement of energy. Your breath symbolizes energy as well, energy going in and out of the system. So whenever in any asana you feel like, okay, you forget to breathe, it is an essential thing that you're forgetting. And you have to you have to translate this into regular life. There are certain instances or certain situations we come across where we hold our breath, not just in anticipation, but sometimes in fear. So the symbolism here is that if we learn how to breathe through these difficult asanas, we can learn how to breathe through difficult situations in life also. So in the most generic way, that is one aspect of symbolism that I can tell you about breathing.
Thank you so much. That was so beautifully answered. And I love how you said that, things that we learn on the mat, we can apply off the mat. That's such an important takeaway. Thank you so much. We have someone who's an anonymous attendee asking if what are the different props that yoga practitioners can include in their practice?
Yeah, and I always tell my students, you can use pretty much anything that you have in your house. You can use your tables, your stools, your chairs. You can use your stoles like dupattas. I have students using their resistance bands. But the main props that I suggest, if you're interested in doing a prop-based practice, the basic props that I would suggest everyone to get is one pair of yoga blocks, and get either the wooden ones or the cork ones because they provide good support. I suggest everyone get a yoga belt. And yes, the real yoga belt and not just a makeshift dupatta. I suggest that everybody should get a bolster. Bolsters are so easily available in India. You can go to any mattress maker, you can get a bolster, and a chair. A chair, you can use a dining chair initially, then you can go for an Iyengar chair, a real yoga chair. But these are a few props that will definitely enhance the quality of your practice.
Thank you so much, Pragya, for sharing. That's about it with the questions. But before we sign out, I'd just like to read out some of the comments for this presentation, because they're really beautiful things that our participants have shared with us. So Pranjali ji is saying, thank you so much for the workshop. Hazel ji is saying, and for all the information. Then Nirja ji is saying, it's a great talk that was full of new perspectives. Suman ji is saying, where can we access your recording? You can access this recording on the Indica Yoga website. It will be available on our website as well as our YouTube channel. And we have some questions in the chat also. How can someone know what's happening in their practice? Soumya ji is asking.
Yes, this is an excellent question. How can we know? And so many people, when they first start out on the yoga journey, they have so many questions, you know. And so the answer, it's twofold. You can never really know, you know, because that's the whole thing about yoga. It is exploration. It is life on a daily basis. You know, you can never really know what's happening. All you can do is do your best, you know. So that is what I always suggest. Do your best, you know, in your yoga practice. Cultivate a relationship with a teacher. Cultivate a relationship with the yoga community. Discuss your aspirations with them, your hesitations with them, your problems with them. And nowadays, Instagram is such a great tool to do that. You know, I know personally have gotten to know so many yoga practitioners on Instagram, and you know, they come with their journeys, their ideas, and you learn so much through them. So how can we know what is happening in our practice? In a way you can never know, and in a way you always know, because it is your practice. So I suggest instead of trying you know, to focus too much on what is happening and on the gains of it, or what am I getting out of it, instead of that, just surrender to the practice. Practice to the best of your ability. Practice with honesty. Practice with discipline. And, you know, whatever questions you have, the answers will come to you. It takes time. So give it some patience and just surrender to the practice. And that's how you will know and not know at the same time. I know it sounds very confusing, and I hope I've managed to shed a little bit of light on your question, but really you cannot know, and in a way you always know.
Thank you so much, Pragya. That was really a very, very beautiful session. And just before we sign out, as everyone can see, you can get in touch with Pragya on pragya.bhatt@gmail.com and her website, yogawithpragya.com. And anyone who wants to reference this session can do so on the Indica Yoga website, where you'll see all our videos for Yoga Insights, as well as the Indica Yoga YouTube channel. And I hope our participants enjoyed. Any message before we sign out that you'd like to share?
Just that, you know, surrender to the practice of yoga. It's a beautiful practice. Think of it as a part of your life. You know, try to be involved with the practice, and over time you'll see that you get so much out of it. Like I said, it's changed my life. It's changed the trajectory of my life, and I believe it has the power to do that for anyone's life. So trust the practice and surrender to it. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Pragya.
Thank you.
I hope you guys can still hear me. Again, apologies for the bad internet today, but this session was so beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you again next Friday for our next session of Yoga Insights. Thank you, Pragya. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend. Thank you.